impressed am I? Hello and welcome to A Mark on the Page. I'm Tia Welsh, intern, skier, writer and all-round bookworm. This evening I'll be finding out what it takes to become a published author on the Isle of Man and whether it's possible to make a living. The saying goes, everyone has a novel hidden inside of them. But what happens when we decide to write it? The Guardian newspaper has described book publishing as a tough industry to get into, and those wanting to make a big name for themselves will likely face many closed doors before they find success. I spoke to the director of Manx Lit Fest, John Quirk, to find out more.
Being published for any writer is the ultimate goal. A lot of writers will say they write for pleasure and for their own purposes, which I think is fine to a point. But I think if you're serious about writing, I think being published, even if it's sort of in small pamphlets or booklets, through to being a sort of fully published novel or a non-fiction book, I think it gives you some kind of justification to your work, and it carries more weight than just sort of writing for no end goal, if you see what I mean. I think that's what publishing means to me, is having a end goal for your writing, for having a meaning for it. Living anywhere in the world, to get your book published traditionally is a difficult thing to do. There's untold stories about agents and publishers receiving X amount of manuscripts in their slush pile every week and every month, and they pick sort of 1% of or whatever it is, of manuscripts to read, to take to a next level, and then they pick up maybe 1% of those books they take to another level.
Could you tell me about Manx Lit Fest and how that's helped open the doors to Manx writers on the island?
Before Lit Fest, there probably was less knowledge about how to go about finding an agent and finding a publisher. What Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and etc. have done over the last sort of 12 years have made it easier for Isle of Man authors, any author really, but we're talking about Isle of Man authors here, to find an audience, to publicise their work at a relatively either no cost or low cost. There's writing groups being set up on Facebook now. We've got Litfest has got one. There's other writing groups around the Isle of Man. There's reading groups. The book community in general has become far more inclusive and far more easy to access. One of the main driving forces behind it was to try and increase the knowledge of writers in the Isle of Man about the publishing industry, about how to get published, ways into publishing, and how to sort of manoeuvre your way through the sometimes choppy waters of publishing. For many years there's been a great number of non-fiction books written about the Isle of Man by Isle of Man authors, and some from don't live in the Isle of Man. For fiction, I think generally you go across, I don't think there's anybody over here as a publisher who is publishing fiction. There might be, maybe if it's sort of a Manx fairy tales, well, they might publish a bit of fiction that way. Back in sort of 2010, 2011 time, there wasn't a great amount of fiction published by Isle of Man writers. And I think that was the goal we set ourselves, to try and give fiction writers living on the Isle of Man an avenue to sort of learn more about the industry and to hopefully get published by meeting agents, by meeting publishers. We set about doing the Writers' Day since the first festival. We asked would-be writers or prospective writers or people who were writing but hadn't been published to come all together on one day, and we had authors giving talks, we had publishers, agents giving talks about the industry, and then we had the pitch sessions where the brave authors would come along with the first sort of 3 chapters of the manuscript and submit it beforehand to the agent, and they'd sit down for 10 minutes and get feedback on the manuscript. And that's quite a nerve-wracking thing. And since then, we've had some success.
Could you sum up what it takes to get published?
You definitely need some kind of talent, some kind of writing talent. You got to have a bit of luck. Right place, right time, submitting to the right publisher at the right time, or catching the eye of an agent at the right time. And you've got to have perseverance. You've just got to get the work done. You've got to sit your backside down on the chair and write, because there's no other way around it. It's not going to write itself. You've got to do the work. If you do the work and you've got a little bit of talent and you can have a little bit of luck, then you've got a chance.
The island is home to a small number of independent publishers, many of which produce Manx tourism and culture books. Sarah Goodwins and George Hobbs, founders of Lopton Books in Mackord, gave me an insight into the industry.
We're looking for quality, price and interest to sell a book. So if somebody's submitting something to us, look at the sort of things we handle and see if your book fits into those categories. I mean, you might be able to write the most absolutely wonderful script for a film, but we don't handle that. And that's not to say it's not publishable. To be fair, if somebody comes to us with something that we think is really good, but we can't handle it because we don't have the contacts, we will say to them, that we think this is really good, you should go to X or Y and try them. And another thing that the author effectively should remember is that when they approach a publisher, they're effectively asking them for money. A publisher that takes you on will have to pay a reader to read your stuff, an editor to knock it into shape. And no matter how good it is, there's always something that needs doing. A typesetter to typeset it, a printer, and any publicity. And they have to do all of that before they've made a single penny. So it's a gamble for the publisher. And many people think that publishing entails sort of reading a lot of interesting works and having deep literary discussions. Yes, there is some of that. But basically, publishing is about selling.
Do you have a rough estimation of how expensive it is to publish a book?
It varies very widely indeed. Obviously, it depends on the size of the book and the sort of content it has in terms of photography, and indeed whether there's any other copyright material for which clearance or perhaps payment may need to be made. But typically we're talking into four figures for even a small book. The more you get printed, then the cheaper the unit cost becomes. There's a certain, if you like, penalty cost in terms of setting up the printing press. But there's no point printing a huge number at a low price if you can't sell them. So again, you want to have a rough idea of how many can you sell. I mean, the old joke is, if you sold them all, you didn't print enough. If you didn't sell them all, you printed too many. Now get it right.
Could you give me the process you go through when you receive a submission to getting it set out and sending it off for publication?
So if we get a submission, we prefer to receive it on hard copy. We will take it on email, but we prefer to receive it on hard copy, simply because it's easier to read. It's also more portable. Submit the first couple of chapters and give an idea of how the book is going to carry on. We'll read it. If we think it's not worth pursuing, we will tell somebody within a fortnight. That's very fast. In the UK, it's usually 3 months, but we try and get back to people within a fortnight. If we think it's worth pursuing, we will then ask the person, whoever it is, to send the rest of the book so that we can read it all. If we then think it's worth pursuing, and we might not, because it's not to say that we try not to waste people's time, but a book can sort of start really well and then wander off. But if we think it's worth pursuing, we will then meet the writer. We won't do that until we've read all their stuff. We will then meet the writer and discuss how we take it forward. From the submission to publication can be as much as 18 months, 2 years, because obviously we've got a schedule and we can't suddenly drop the schedule and stuff somebody else in. But then we will work with the author. What will tend to happen is we will edit it and prepare any images in-house, but then send the author proofs so that they can see that what we're intending to do with it. They can object, and we will listen to their objections, but bear in mind we know what we're doing and they may not. I mean, we've had people come and say, well, what I actually want is a coffee table A4 book, and we've pointed out we can't sell a coffee table A4 book with your material, but we can sell a 2/3 A4 slightly softer booklet, and it's gone very well. So we will have that sort of discussion. Once it gets to the print stage, we will do all the typesetting in-house. We will let the author see and comment and correct the typeset pages. They won't see the proofs. But the reason they won't see the proofs is because the proofs are exactly the same as the typesetting stuff, because we do all the typesetting in-house. And if we start sending proofs out to the author and back again, then that interrupts the print schedule. We will brief the printer, the press. From there, the author will get 6 free copies, and then we will treat them as a retailer. If they want to buy extra copies, then they get a discount. And they will also get paid royalties depending on what we've agreed as royalties. It can be anything between 6% of what we what retailers pay us and 13% of what retailers pay us, which is of course not the cover price because we have to give a discount to retailers to sell it on. And then we will do all the things we do. We will contact the media. We will send out all the advanced information to all our retailers, and we will just generally try and publish the book as we can.
Local author Elizabeth Brooks found her route into publishing at Manx Lit Fest. 7 years on, she's had 3 books published by a mainstream UK publisher, but her journey was no piece of cake.
I thought when I got an agent, all right, this is it, I've made it now. It's just one step from agent to publisher. But even then, actually, the first book that I submitted to her, she submitted it around to all various publishers, and that got rejected by everybody. Oh. So actually, it wasn't the case that as soon as you've got an agent, you've made it. Even then, you've got to have the right book that the publishers will pick up. So it's just such a long game, really. So it was the second book that I wrote for her that actually got picked up, Call of the Curlew.
Many publishing houses focus on the market and what's available and what people want to see on their bookshelves.
I suppose you can't really plan to be sort of have your novel like be sort of with the zeitgeist sort of thing, because you're always like 2 years behind. So you can't like say, for example, the book that I've just published now deals a bit with sort of mental health issues, which is actually quite sort of high on the agenda at the moment by chance. But I couldn't have sort of known that or planned that. It was kind of a little bit fortuitous for me that it had, because by the time you've written something that you think is really on the button, you're 2 years on by the time you've published it. So it's quite difficult to get that right, really.
So quite a long time to get published.
Well, it is really, because it's different for different genres. For the sort of, I think mine is kind of described as literary fiction. It tends to be like one every 2 years. I think for more commercial fiction, perhaps you'd be expected to write much quicker and a bit much quicker turnover, and maybe even like once every 6 months or so, which seems incredibly quick to me.
So which format did it come out on first? Paperback or hardback?
It tends to come out in hardback first and then paperback the following year. So yes, I've got the Call of the Curlew in hardback 2018 and paperback 2019, and then my new one is hardback 2020.
These are things people don't even think about.
Yes.
When buying a book.
I know, it's a long process, it really is, yeah.
During your journey to getting published, did you face any particular challenges? As a writer, you've got to learn to be resilient and deal with all the rejection letters from the publishers and the literary agents, and be able to bounce back and think, it's not about me, myself, personally.
You really do. And then once it's published, even then, there's all the reviews that come in, and there's the nice reviews and there's the bad reviews. And I think you have to make a decision as to whether you're going to read them all, because they can really, the bad ones can really stay with you, I think. I find that anyway. Maybe I'm just too sensitive about it, but I think it's easy to get really sort of down about it, because I think any book, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like it, and there's always going to be people who do like it. So I think you just have to really kind of get your head in order and just understand that, and not be like completely wounded by all the any negative reviews, because it's such a personal thing to like have out there. It's like putting a little part of yourself out there and then having people say, oh, I didn't like this, and you think, oh no, it's part of me. But yeah, I think you really do have to develop a thick skin and be a little bit detached from it, and just think, I'm not going to take this really personally or let it get me down.
With the traditional route into getting published being so difficult, it's no wonder that writers have found ways to bypass the sharp eyes of publishing houses and literary agents, a process made easier by developments in technology. I spoke to Andrea Rollo.
There was no way I was going to send it off to various publishers and, get loads of rejections and have to wait sort of 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. So we just went straight for this one, which is literally you upload it yourself. They have a quick look to check that everything's all right, and then they put it on as an ebook, and if you choose to, also as a paperback, which you can then buy either through Amazon, or as an author you can buy copies for yourself as well. Basically, we got it into a Word document, and then from there we were able to put it onto templates that they provide. So although it took some fiddling, it wasn't really, if you were a techie person, it would be a piece of cake.
How long did the whole publishing process take from the writing of the novel to getting it printed and seeing the finished thing?
It was very quick with me. I wrote it in about a week and a half because I was just like, it wanted to come out and it came out, bleh, didn't do anything else for a week and a half. Within another couple of weeks we'd edited it and got some couple of other people to read it to just double check our editing and find all the things we'd missed. And then to put it onto Kindle, it was on within 72 hours.
The paperback printing is done by Amazon?
Yes, it is. You don't have to tell them to print a certain number. As someone orders it online through Amazon, they then print one copy. So it's not like you have to have 100 copies printed or anything, which is incredible, because so often you hear of people who've self-published and they end up with a couple of boxes left that no one's bought, whereas with this I haven't got to invest anything, and they sell them one at a time and print them one at a time. Seems more ecologically sound as well, not to print hundreds of books that nobody wants. So my husband has had to learn how to use Twitter, because that seems to be a really good way of, if you have a publisher, they do all the publicity for you and make sure it goes out to bookshops and things. I mean, obviously on Kindle you've got none of that, it's on Amazon, but you've got to tell people it's there because there's millions of other books on Amazon. So that's been the bit that's time consuming.
Authors don't earn that much because obviously you take the wages out of the printing process and the bookseller, but what's it like being self-published? I mean, are you saving money or earning more?
It's not costing us anything. I mean, obviously publicity we choose to do, but most of that we've done on social media, so that doesn't cost anything. Actually producing the ebook doesn't cost anything. They print the paperbacks as people order them, so it doesn't cost me anything. Obviously I pay for authors' copies, which I've had 20 or 30 of, for friends and family, but they were very cheap. They give you a good deal because you're the author. They don't put all the extras on. But of the $7.99 for a paperback, I think we only get about £2 or something like that. And the ebook's similar, it's about £2. So it's not a major amount, but it's probably as much as you'd get through a publisher, because like you say, they'd have a lot more people to pay, to wages and things to get the book to the bookshelf, as it were. So I don't know, because I've never gone that way, but I imagine that you get a similar amount of profit doing it this way. It's just that you've got to publicise it yourself. I've tried a couple of local bookshops, but they don't really want to stock it because it's not about the Isle of Man, and that I don't think they think there'd be a big enough market. So it really has got to be me publicising it. A couple of people have asked, is it in shops? And the answer to that is no, not really. I've got Cannell's agricultural suppliers up north have said they'll take a couple of copies because it's about horses and it's about a livery yard. They felt it might well appeal to their sort of customers because they sell horse food and things. So they've said they'll take a couple of copies so that people can actually buy it from a shop. But the bookshops are not really very interested, which is fine, that's their choice.
Why didn't you follow the traditional route to getting published?
Because people talk about a year, 16 months of publishing houses holding on to the book and then rejecting them, and I don't have the patience for that.
And it seems publishing houses have also latched onto this growing trend. Miles Cowsill is the director of Lily Publications.
People are very keen to see their books published, be they historical or novels, etc. So yes, we set that part up. It stands alone on our website, so people can see what individual Manx people or people from the UK who want to write about the Isle of Man themselves.
How does the submission process work, and how do you choose what to publish?
Well, we have a budget every year, which is set by our financial director, my wife, Linda. So once we've used that budget up, we're really not in a position to go and publish any other books, except if something comes around the corner at you that you feel is going to make money for the business and is going to be of interest to local people, then we will go and do it. So that's how we that is our role model of how we run the business. With the self-publishing, obviously, the people, once they have the final proofs for the book they want to publish, they then have to pay for it, and then we account to them accordingly on sales thereafter.
Such digital developments include the invention of the e-reader, which is becoming increasingly popular, another bonus for the self-published author. After many years of trying to make it as an author, Rachel Bennett saw success when her novel, The Flood, was published. But it would be a while before it hit the bookshops.
There's a lot of publishers that are doing digital first and rather than going the traditional route of paperbacks, because it's a way of getting books to people quickly and immediately and at a low cost. A lot of publishers do still go the traditional route. You have hardbacks and paperbacks, but increasingly as the ebook market expands and takes off, a lot of places are exploring the digital first market, and I know that a lot of imprints have been set up specifically to deal with this market, because it is one that is really taking off and people are very keen on their ebooks at the moment. So it's a way to get more titles to people quicker and without the intermediaries of having to actually print off physical copies as well.
Was there any preference to digital or paperback from your audience?
You get a little bit of both, because you get an awful lot of people who prefer ebooks. I know that both books have been doing very well in America at the moment, because we were able to do a bit of a publicity push to get them under people's eyes, as it were. So they've been selling quite well in America, and that's not something that would have really been feasible if they'd been paperbacks. You would have had to ship them and market them and all the rest and get them into bookshops. But because ebooks are instant and electric, they can get around the world.
Had you ever considered self-publishing at some point, or was it always traditional route?
Two of my older books, which were published by independent publishing houses in the UK, they are out on ebook now. They're my older ones under the name of Reiki Keg. But when the rights came back to me and I wasn't sure what to do with them, the easiest thing to do was to stick them as ebooks and just, keep them ticking over. But again, I don't have the sort of get up and go to have really promoted them like I should. I could have made a much better deal of them if I knew what I was doing. But it was an option for something to do, and I've had a positive experience from it. It has been fun.
So do you have any say over which bookshops stock your book? What were the local bookshops like on the island when you first launched?
Bookshops over here are absolutely great, and no matter how advanced and electronic and immediate the world gets, nothing can really beat word of mouth. If you go into a bookshop and say, hey, I've got my book coming out next week, could you get some copies on the shelf? Chances are they'll say, oh yeah, go on then, we'll put some on the shelf. And we're very lucky to have independent bookshops like the Bridge Bookshop, who will really go the extra mile for you. They're hosting a book signing for me on August the 22nd up in Ramsey, so that's going to be absolutely great. And even with ebooks and everything, still word of mouth is the best way to get stuff into bookshops. And I've heard of people who will literally go around the country, load their car up with books, go to each and every bookstore, find out the name of the manager and speak to them personally and say, hey, can you stock my book? And it's exhausting, obviously, but it does work. So in short, I personally don't have much say unless I wanted to have a say. If I wanted to go the extra mile and ask all the bookshops, then definitely.
A lot of authors I've spoken to have said they don't earn that much once everything is broken down. Is this the case?
It's so difficult to say, and it's so subjective. A lot of places, you used to get the book advances where publishers would give you an amount per book, say £5,000, and then you had to earn out from the royalties on that. And a lot of books, even quite popular books, never earned out their royalties, so the authors would never see any other money from it. With digital first especially, and with a lot of places, are now giving a better royalty deal instead of paying advances. And this works out better for the company because they are able to, put the ebooks out at a much lower cost to everyone. The last one I got, the one I got for a flood in February was about £400, and that was for the first few months of sales. So it was a lovely amount to get, but I'm not going to be retiring on it anytime soon. And I think people need to come to terms with the idea that it's incredibly difficult to make a living from it.
So the proof is in the pudding. Publishing opportunities do exist here on the Isle of Man, but the road isn't often smooth, and even more rarely lucrative. Perhaps not even enough to support a full-time career, though, of course, the island is yet to produce its own answer to J.K. Rowling.